Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan, Rahayu. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome all of you to the second day of PYC International Energy Conference 2023. Taking place right here in the Financing Parallel Room with the theme Optimizing Multilateral Collaboration and Public-Private Partnership to Boost Energy Transition Financing in ASEAN. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Vivit Amalia, a researcher of Purnomo Yusgiantoro Center, and I will be your master of ceremony for today's discussion. Thank you for attending the PYC International Energy Conference. It is a great pleasure for us to have you in this very super exciting event. Now, allow me to greet all the honorable speakers for this morning's event. Mr. David Elzinga, Principal Energy Specialist, Climate Change Southeast Asia Department from Asian Development Bank. Good morning, David. And Bapak Pradana Murti, Director of Risk Management from PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur. Selamat pagi, Bapak Pradana. And Bapak Slamet Rona Irham, Management Advisor in the Director of Government Support and Infrastructure Financing Management, Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. Selamat pagi, Bapak. And the last speakers who joined online, Mr. Grant Hauber, a Strategic Energy Finance Advisor from Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. Is he okay? And our moderators today, Bapak Inka Yusgiantoro. Selamat pagi, Pak Inka. Okay, moving on, I would like to read Bapak Inka's short bio. Bapak Inka Yusgiantoro is head of the Supervisory Board of the Purnomo Yusgiantoro Center. He was working in the Indonesia Financial Services Authority since 2013 and is currently advisor in the Department of Strategic and Change Management. Previously, he was research fellow at John F. Kennedy School of Government, Harvard University, and investment banking professional in New York City and Singapore. In academia, he is currently lecturer in the graduate program of economics at Universitas Indonesia and in the graduate program of and in the financial risk management program at Universitas Katolik Indonesia at Majaya. He has published papers in top-notch international journals such as Quarterly Review of Economics and Finance, International Economics and Research in International Business and Finance. Bapak Inka received his PhD and MA in Regional Economics from Cornell University, MS in Operation Research from Columbia University, and BSc in Industrial and Operation Engineering, as well as MSc in Financial Engineering from the University of Michigan. Distinguished participation. Without further ado, I would like to invite our moderator to the stage. Please welcome Bapak Inka Yusgiantoro.
Thank you, Bu Vivit. Good morning to everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. I would like first to welcome you to the second day of Purnomo Yusgiantoro Center's International Energy Conference 2023, organized by the Purnomo Yusgiantoro Center, in collaboration with the Energy Cooperation Coordinator under ASEAN 2023 Chairmanship Secretariat, Indonesian Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, Center for Policy Development, Australia, Climate Works Center, International Institute for Sustainable Development, Indonesia Research Institute for Decarbonization, and the Institute for Essential Services Reform. So welcome to the energy financing session, and our theme for this session is optimizing multilateral collaboration and public-private partnership to boost energy transition financing in ASEAN. And this is for one of the 4 parallel sessions that we have today for the International Energy Conference. And my name is Inka Yusgiantoro, and I'm very honored to moderate this session. So our session this morning aims to explore financing issues and possible solutions to enhance the implementation of collaborative multilateral financing mechanisms and PPP for energy transition in Indonesia as well as the ASEAN region. As we all know, the energy transition program is crucial for achieving the net zero target before 2060. From the supply side, Indonesia has committed to increase the share of renewable energy by 23% in the national energy mix by 2025. Likewise, the whole ASEAN region also aims to reach 23% proportion of renewable energy in their energy mix by 2025. However, as at 2021, if you can see the table here, renewable energy only accounted for 14.4% of the total primary energy supply in ASEAN. So to achieve these regional goals, ASEAN must embrace all available funding opportunities within the region as well as outside the regions. Traditionally, emerging markets and developing economies have relied on public sources of finance, recently accounting for nearly 60% of clean energy investment. To achieve climate targets, this trend would need to shift dramatically, and private capital will need to account for 60% of the clean energy investment, a level that is still below advanced economies at almost 60%. So while multilateral financing and PPP have existed in Indonesia as well as ASEAN for decades, they have not been utilized optimally to support the energy transition period in today's era. In terms of multilateral financing, of course, we can refer it to as a provision of financial resources from multiple countries or organizations to support development projects in the recipient country. Multilateral financing is typically provided by multilateral development organizations such as the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and the African Development Bank, which channel funds from multiple donor countries to developing countries. So we believe that multilateral financing is an important source of funding for the EMDE's region, and particularly for those regions that have limited access to private capital markets. So in addition, multilateral financing can also help to promote policy reform and institutional development in recipient countries, as well as help to leverage additional resources from other sources such as the private sector investment. Meanwhile, a public-private partnership, or otherwise we are known to be abbreviated as PPP, it's a long-term contractual agreement between government and the private sector institution to provide a public asset or service. So PPPs are typically involved private capital financing government projects upfront and then drawing revenues from the public over the course of the PPP contract. So PPPs play a very important role in accelerating ASEAN's renewable energy transition by offering financial support for projects, mitigating initial infrastructure expenses, mobilizing private sector investments, enhancing public sector capabilities, and fostering sustainable infrastructure growth throughout the region. In ASEAN alone, there are 510 projects with a total value of around 151 billion of PPP investment in the electricity sector between 2000 and 2020. And the leader in renewable technologies has been hydro, followed by geothermal, solar, and wind, with a total PPV investment value of around 23.8 billion, 7.2 billion, 5.6 billion, and 5.2 billion respectively. So since energy transition is a prime focus for many private financing institutions, the two approaches that I just mentioned, offer promising options for financing the renewable energy sector in the future. But the complex and unclear nature of the process makes it challenging for energy transition participants to access these mechanisms. So this session aims to bring the real issues in the implementation of multilateral financing mechanisms and PPP in Indonesia as well as ASEAN, and we try to propose also possible solutions to those issues. So for this particular conference, we will produce a policy brief for key stakeholders that will include key recommendations to boost energy transition in Indonesia and ASEAN. The recommendations will serve as a guideline to formulate energy transition roadmap and inclusive energy policy. So I would like to ask all of the audience here in this room, while you sit comfortably and listen to the presentation materials, think about the questions that you have for the speakers, and perhaps also maybe some also recommendations or feedback that you have to accelerate this energy transition mechanisms and multilateral financing mechanisms. So before we proceed, allow me to introduce our distinguished panel of experts who will bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to this discussion. So please join me in welcoming our first speaker, Mr. David Elzinga. I hope I pronounced your last name correctly. He's from Asia Development Bank. Yes, please. So Mr. David Elzinga is a seasoned sustainability and climate change professional with over 20 years experience in both public and private sectors. He specializes in innovation, infrastructure, finance, policy, and analysis. With a background in engineering, he has successfully led projects worldwide, collaborating with diverse stakeholders, including corporations, governments, NGOs, and financial institutions. Currently, Mr. David serves as the principal energy specialist at the Asian Development Bank, or ADB, where he has contributed to the energy transition mechanism initiatives for the past 7 years. Prior to joining ADB, he held key roles at the UN Economic Commissions for Europe and the International Energy Agency. So, welcome, David. So next, our second speaker, he will be joining us online from Buffalo, New York, Mr. Grant Hauber from Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. So Mr. Grant is currently a strategic energy finance advisor from Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, or IEEFA. He provides strategic advice on energy and financial markets for IEEFA's Asia Pacific team. With an emphasis on the region's emerging markets, he provides insights to project finance, multilateral development institutions, and implementing the energy transition. Grant's experience spans over 30 years in 30 different countries, covering energy markets and infrastructure, public-private partnerships. He has garnered expertise as a project developer in both renewable and conventional electricity, a project finance investment banker, and energy asset strategies. Mr. Grant Hauber holds a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Carnegie Mellon University and MBA from Yale School of Management. Our third speaker is Mr. Pradana Murti from PT Sarana Multi Infrastructure, or PT SME. He is currently serving as Director of Risk Management. Please come forward, Pak Pradana. He's a Director of Risk Management at PT Sarana Multi Infrastructure. Previously, Mr. Pradana was Head of Sustainable Finance from 2020 to 2022, Head of the Project Development from 2013 to 2020, Head of the Project Showcase Task Force from 2011 to 2013, and Investment and Financing Manager from 2009 to 2011 at PT SME. He was also previously a consultant from 2004 to 2009 at Steer Davis Gleave in United Kingdom, with brief secondment period as Interim Commercial Analyst Manager at Great North Eastern Railway, or National Express East Coast, UK. He earned his Master of Science in Transport Planning from the University of Leeds, UK in 2003, and his Bachelor degree in Civil Engineering from the Institute Teknologi of Bandung, Indonesia in 2002. Last but not least, our fourth speaker is Bapak Slamet Rona Irkam from the Ministry of Finance, Republic of Indonesia. Mr. Slamet Rona Irkam is currently a management advisor in the Director of Government Support and Infrastructure Finance Management, Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. He has diverse professional experience in infrastructure financing, procurement, and public-private partnerships. Having more than 15 years of experience at the Ministry of Finance official in the area of government support for infrastructure development, he was responsible for the provision of government guarantee for Fast Track Program 1 and 2, Business Viability Guarantee Letter for geothermal development, and developing the viable gap fund mechanisms for PPP projects. So we are very pleased, honored to have all of you. Thank you for joining us today, and please give a big round of applause to our four great speakers this morning. So before we start, I will address some guidelines for this session, and each presenter will have about 15 to 20 minutes to present, to deliver their presentations. Then it will be followed by Q&A and discussion session after all panelists have been completing their presentations. And in the Q&A session, I encourage the participants again to be active and ask questions to all of the speakers. Now, let's begin with the presentation. So we will begin with the first speaker. I would like to welcome Mr. David Elzinga. David will discuss ASEAN's energy transition investment from a financial institution's perspective. He will share his perspective on the progress of GETP, Indonesia's preparation, including investment strategies, potential bottlenecks, and avenues for catalyzing renewable energy investment funds. So David, it's great to see you, and I hope you're in good health. So thank you for joining us, and please, kindly, the stage is yours.
Great, thank you very much, and thank you to the organizers for inviting ADB for this. And so today I'd like to talk about mainly two projects with respect to energy transition. It's a very big topic, and I'm going to focus on two projects. So if I can have the organizers put up my slides, please. ADB has been engaged in Indonesia since the very beginning of its establishment. We have done some of our first projects here and continue to operate. It was nice to see our institution highlighted in some of the earlier slides with respect to our investments in the region and in the country. If I could ask for my slides to be displayed. Great, thank you. If you can go to the next slide, please. So when we look at energy transition, I think it's when we look at the left side of the curve, we see a range of different projects. So we at this point, in my work specifically at ADB, we very much focused on the one area, on the coal to clean energy transition. But that is just one area. We see that really energy transition is about developing the energy sector, and it includes all kinds of different areas. E-mobility, which will require the infrastructure from the power sector to power that. We talk about energy efficiency, something that is often overlooked in energy planning, especially in high-growth countries, but is an area that can yield significant both financial and climate dividends when investments are taken in that area. And of course, just to highlight one more of the core areas, distributed renewable energy in rural or urban areas. So not only focusing on centralized power production, but looking at the distributed aspects. And again, these are all part of things that make that transition from fossil to clean energy, but also bring forward a modern energy system, and specifically in the power sector, where we're seeing on a global basis trends really going towards electrification in energy. But that's not to say that other energy vectors won't be important, but electrification really is an area that is growing and can provide significant socio and economic benefits. Now on the right side of the graph, we look at, what does it take to really be successful in energy transition? And I think the first thing is really looking at the planning aspect. How do we create those roadmaps to really look forward to the future and say, where do we want to go in order to support society, to support the economy as we move through this energy transition? It is a significant challenge to move away from practices in the past which are often have provided significant benefits. We talk about, how coal is such often perceived as such a, let's call it a bad technology, but it has provided significant benefits to many societies around the world as well. So how do we move from the ways that we have done things in the power sector in this example to cleaner ways that can provide the same benefits of electricity, but also minimize and remove those pollution and climate impacts that we don't want. So planning, I think, is really a significant part of that. The other aspect is on policies. And in that respect, there has to be an environment that supports both private sector, but also the public sector in making these new investments. Again, when we use the word energy transition, that word transition indicates that changes need to be made. And really thoughtful ways to do that are needed. And one of the ways that we, as a multilateral development bank, support that is through policy-based loans, where we can support those policies and the changes that those bring. And because those often come initially with costs, but again, we're in an exciting time where I think clean energy solutions have come down in price, so that the transition doesn't necessarily mean it has to cost more, but it has to be supported by good planning and good policy. And then at the end, of course, we need finance. We do that through a range of ways, both technical assistance that again can support that policy planning and those roadmaps, but also on the ground infrastructure, and also results-based products where we provide general funding, but based on conditions of shifting away from fossil fuel towards clean energy. So it really requires that whole thing. Any of these aspects on their own will not be enough. And the second point I want to make, just related to this, is that the figures shown in the introduction I think are really powerful. I don't think the private sector nor the public sector can do this on their own. It really has to be working together and find those ways for the respective public or private to really work where it can best provide value. And so if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to talk about, as I said earlier, 2 projects. I want to focus on one in Cambodia first, the Cambodia National Solar Park. This is a solar park that was developed in 2 phases. One is 60 megawatt and one is 40 megawatt. And I won't go through all the details on this slide, but I'll highlight that this is a small country with a very small solar energy sector and a small energy sector. And really it was competing with big countries, big solar markets, and working in partnership with the Cambodian government, both their Ministry of Energy as well as their utility, EDC, to really say, how can Cambodia take a big step forward and develop solar power as one of the energy solutions in their electricity sector. And so next slide, please. One of the key things, the key successes to this project was really clearly identifying where the public sector plays a role and where the private sector plays a role. So let me highlight some of these aspects. Number one is the one with the blue one indicated there. And that was defining the solar park. So this included mainly land acquisition to where the solar panels can be installed. This is an area of high uncertainty often for the private sector. Are they able to obtain land at a fair price in a good location? This is an area where if this risk can be removed and placed with the government, the risk is lowered from the private sector and given to the public sector, who is best placed to organize that and do that in a way that's both fair in price, but also fair for any of the people and communities that may be established on that land. So that is an area where the public sector can play a key role. Another area is in the grid connection and related infrastructure. This often is led by the utility. There are costs, there are real costs involved, but this infrastructure is often controlled and owned by the utility. So if the private sector doesn't have ownership of that, doesn't necessarily influence the policy that is related to that, this introduces a significant risk to the private sector, and therefore any increase in risk will increase costs. So in that respect, this is another area where the public sector can have a significant role, and really it is an appropriate role for the public sector to engage. Now the third part is the actual solar PV power plants themselves. Now this is an area where I think the private sector has demonstrated that it can compete, it can provide the most efficiency and the lowest cost. And you know, worldwide, often when public sector tries to build infrastructure, it does so inefficiently and often at higher costs. Now this isn't always the case. It's not meant to be a criticism of any specific project or country, but there is data to reflect that the public sector often is not as efficient as the private sector when it comes to building projects. The second point, when you take away the risks that are related to the actual park and the connection infrastructure, you can then compete the projects through an auction basis that again introduces that competition within the private sector, driving the price down again. And all these things were done in this project, very much clearly identifying where can the public sector play a relevant role and where can the private sector. Bringing these together, you can bring down the price significantly. So next slide, please. So some of the key results that came out of this. At the time, the lowest tariff for solar PV in ASEAN at the time of bidding, and this saved about $150 million to the utility. So that is a core result, and again, as I highlighted, this was a very small project actually relative to the region. And it showcased Cambodia as an attractive investment destination. This again is good for the country. If they see that one investment goes well in the country, well, that provides benefits to other sectors. So it helped develop the solar sector. So there was a strategy to procure the solar energy, and other solar PV projects are and could be implemented in Cambodia. And then from a regional basis, you know, we're hopeful that this is a model that can be applied in many other countries. Because I think there really is a significant value to this to really bring down the costs and bring efficiency not only in time but financially into solar energy. Next slide. So just highlighting some of the things, you know, the other part of this was so public and private sector for this session, but what is the role of multilateral institutions? So what we tried to do is really come in and be involved all through the entire project. So in the project preparation side, working with the government to develop the renewable energy master plan, so grid studies, resource studies, all those things so that the government feels comfortable with this technology. Again, introducing variable renewables compared to baseload does offer some concern, especially when utilities don't have experience integrating them. So being engaged in that very much from the beginning, and then also transaction advisory support, taking that knowledge from other countries, bringing that and then putting it in the context, in this case in the Cambodian context, to really understand how do we work together to structure this in a way that works for all the actors, the private sector and the public sector. Then the next phase was in the actual tender process. So again, we engaged through that, providing TA support so that they had the best experts to support them in one of their first times in going through this process. So I think that was really an important thing. Again, once they've done it, they can replicate this and do this again. But sometimes the first time doing that, the support is significantly valued. And then lastly, providing access to sovereign and private sector funding. So as ADB as an institution, we can provide public sector support, but also private sector support. And I'm being told I have 1 minute left. All right, thank you. I will move a little more quickly, thank you. And lastly, providing that support to the actual funds and crowding in commercial sources, again, increasing that amount of funds from the commercial sector. So next slide, please. So I highlighted one, which is developing renewable energies and grid scale generation and grid investment as one of those key transition pillars. I'm now going to talk about the ETM as one of those areas where we can support the coal to clean energy transition. Next slide, please. So the ETM is something that really is trying to accelerate that transition from coal to clean energy. What we see is that there are significant shares of coal power in Asia, across the region, and what we want to see is that acceleration from coal to clean energy. There have been many steps that are starting to limit new developments of coal, but new developments of coal and increasing the role of renewables. But with respect to coal power, if we're going to meet global climate goals, we need to decrease and accelerate away from clean energy. Next slide, please. What this means and the impacts of this is that moving from coal to clean energy isn't going to happen immediately, but if we can do it in a managed way, say with the energy transition mechanism, what we can do is create more space for renewables, but doing that in a way that keeps the stability of the grid. This will reduce emissions and in the long time will reduce costs in the energy sector as prices come down for renewables. And this also has the opportunity to create new industries and jobs for the country. Next slide, please. So again, going back to the first slide where we talk about energy transition, this isn't something where we can jump straight ahead to scale up. It has to be put in the context of each individual country. And we do that through initial studies, pre-feasibility studies, going into larger studies, and then pilot transactions to really understand what are the impacts of these specific transactions. And only then can we move to scale up. Next slide, please. And we see that for the transactions, and again, this goes back to the link of engaging with both public and private sector, we see different models that can be supported. And in many energy sectors, especially in ASEAN, but around the world, you have plants that are both owned by the public utility and plants that are owned by the private sector. So you need to find ways to address both of those if you want to accelerate this transition. We talk about an acquisition model where the plant is purchased and then put in a vehicle that can then operate it for a period of time, but much shorter. We also see what we call a synthetic model, that we can refinance or re-leverage the plant, again, still meeting that reduced operation or early retirement. And lastly, a portfolio model where low-cost finance can be provided for clean energy, but on the condition that fossil energy is reduced. Next slide, please. So I'll just highlight one specific transaction model that we're doing. And in this case, we're actually doing a pilot project using this model right now. This doesn't show all the parts of it, but it just illustrates the approach. We're actually using debt-like instruments to re-lever the financing. So typically the debt financing has a lower return compared to the equity financing. And as the debt is paid off during the operation of the plant, you can re-lever that, bring it back to, say, a 25-75 split where you have less equity portion and more debt, and therefore bringing down the lower weighted average cost of capital. So what we're doing is we're using debt proceeds and paying those to the shareholders in a special dividend, and in return, they're reducing the life of the plant. This is a common financing approach, but instead of the owners of the plant using it to invest in more coal, they're reducing the life of the plant and committing to invest in clean energy instead. So the existing shareholders remain, and the existing finance arrangements can be either, they can stay the same, the existing debt, or we can buy them out, continuing to reduce the cost of capital. And then lastly, of course, the utility needs to be negotiated with. They're counting on this power for a certain amount of time. We have to renegotiate the PPA so that they can again plan for their system operation and ensure that they have security of supply. Next slide, please. So this just illustrates the cash flows, and you see the power of low-cost financing, that we can shave off approximately 7 years off the PPA. Now, some people might say that 7 years isn't very much, but this example is a 30-year PPA. So we're just showing the remaining 20 years in this slide. But by reducing 7 years off the 30-year PPA, we then actually also reduce those additional years. Next slide, please. And I think this is my last slide. I'll just highlight that this is not just a technical, this is not just a financial aspect. We need to include policy aspects, make sure that the people and communities that work or live near these plants are supported so that they're not left behind when we transition away from fossil fuel. And lastly, of course, this has to be done in partnership with all the actors, both the country planning, the private sector, as well as the non-governmental and civil society organizations. So I think that's my last slide. Thank you very much for this presentation.
Thank you, David. So, two things that David has presented. One is highlighting a success story of the solar panel park project in Cambodia. And I think the key word for that is collaboration between the private and public financing. And second, also on the energy transition mechanisms. And I'm sure in that presentation, some of you may have questions, but please hold to that questions because we will move on to the second speaker. And that will be Mr. Grant Hauber. Grant, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thanks.
So Grant will give us an overview of the investment climate for Asia's energy transition. He will also highlight the challenges in energy transition investments due to current policies, regulations, infrastructure, and more particularly within ASEAN. Furthermore, recommendations will be discussed to guide governments in enhancing the investment climate for energy transition in the short, medium, and long terms. So this conversation is vital for a thorough analysis of energy transition financing in ASEAN and for enhancing the investment environment to attain the ASEAN energy transition goal. So Grant, it's good to see you, and I hope it's not too late for you. And thank you for joining us, and please deliver your presentations in 15 to 20 minutes. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Inka. Yes, I'm really pleased to be here with you this morning and with a really distinguished and highly relevant panel to this discussion. Really appreciate the organizers putting this together. Yeah, as Inka said, I was asked to provide an overview of the ASEAN energy transition investment landscape and and I'm going to look at some factors that impact financing that will take us towards a decarbonized future in the region. I'm also going to look at a little bit of the green funds flow and examine some of the implications that and the opportunities to increase those flows to the region. And then I'll kind of look briefly at the private sector requirements to get that money, which represents the bulk of funds available in the world, moving, and then make some recommendations for your consideration. So I'm also thinking about this in the context of the big opportunity that JETP and the ETM that David was talking about represents. You know, these are portfolios of projects and transactions that will occur over years, which means the flow of funds to these green opportunities needs to be consistent and large. So let's take a look a little bit at what's been going on. You know, there's always been interest in investing in Southeast Asia's high potential markets. You have fast growing countries with youthful populations, multitude of resources, and therefore opportunity. And then when you combine that now with the green transition investments coming, this is really an opportunity of a generation. Doesn't come along that often. So what I wanted to look at right now is like kind of where the flow of funds into ASEAN through green finance have been coming from. You know, there are 6 economies so far have issued green bonds. So these are the ones that look at or target green investments or sustainability linked investments and social investments that foster resilience for climate change. There are currently $126 billion worth of ESG bonds outstanding in ASEAN. 6 countries have issued bonds, and Indonesia has been really a leader and innovator in that, having issued the first green sukuk back in 2018, $1.25 billion. You had the first non-bank financial institution that issued a green bond. And, you know, it is a large potential source for helping co-finance this transition. As you can see from this chart, there have been a lot of different issues and different types of bonds, mostly though in green and sustainability-linked bonds. But what's interesting to me is that across countries, there's different reliance on foreign bond buyers versus domestic bond buyers. Indonesia tends to look towards the foreign currency markets to bring in that money, whereas on the other end of the spectrum, Thailand is nearly entirely self-banked. That means that all the money is coming from within Thailand for these green bonds. Neither is good or bad. And I actually believe that in a case where you are trying, in this case, to innovate, grow the pie, as it were, bringing in new sources of capital from the outside is actually an important way to do that, rather than recirculating what you have already inside your country. Now that runs somewhat counter to what advice is from, say, from ADB's finance people or the IMF, in that, you know, typically you want to build that local currency market and to have things denominated in your local currency. But I think in this case, where you're trying to really transform and move the economy in a new direction, bringing in that outside money is going to be very important. In a sense, it's like bringing in money for bonds is like a north to south money transfer that we've been trying to achieve through the negotiations through the UN and with JETP programs. Let me see. I'm going to move on to this. Okay, so putting that 126 billion outstanding into the context of the current market is, the global ESG bond market has over $900 billion issued in 2022 alone. And this year, there's $425 billion that have been issued in the first half. ASEAN right now has 22 billion in 2022 and 10 billion in 2023. That's only 2.5% of the total global green bond market. What that means is there's tremendous room to grow that and and attract the green capital to this region if the policies and opportunities are right. And you can see here when we put this all together in the context of ASEAN, there's a lot of room for growth. That the ASEAN +3 market, 700 billion cumulative. Globally, it's 4.2 trillion. And even that 4.2 trillion is a drop in the bucket for the whole total global market opportunity. So there's much more that we can do to encourage this. I'm going to go into some things now, like how we do that. One of the ways that we at least define what a green investment is through taxonomies. And green taxonomies have been rolled out both nationally and regionally. ASEAN has its own taxonomy, as does many of the countries in the region. And what that's trying to do is define what is a green investment, what is a green activity, and how, and then by defining that, it gives a signal to the market where governments want the money put, where corporates want the money to be placed in order to achieve the goals set out. Now, a lot of times what happens is that these green taxonomy frameworks are formulated in parallel with national decarbonization policy and national development policy. And obviously, when you do that, you are trying to maximize your national self-interest or your regional self-interest. But what happens is sometimes what has been happening is that the other side of the equation is left out in consultations, and that's the bond buyers, the investors. They too have it's much easier to do the policy development and consultation in a vacuum rather than reaching out to your prospective buyer and consulting with them on what they want. But they too have their own, bond buyers who are looking at the green and sustainability market have their own sort of taxonomy internally within their credit committees and investment committees. And so what we are trying to do here is actually optimize the two sides so that there's alignment and less friction to get deals done and bring the money in. And we do need to bring the money in. I think when you look at the context of what's proposed for the JETP by the International Partners Group for Indonesia at $20 billion, you had South Africa at $8.5 billion. We're now looking at a large amount of money proposed for Vietnam. These amounts of money are unprecedented in regional development finance from a development finance perspective. And there's and because we've been talking about these mechanisms and the types of bilateral government agencies and the multilateral development agencies involved, it often gets into a fight on how low a cost of capital can we get. We want everything in the form of grants. Or if we can't get grants, we want highly concessional finance to do all these things that the JETPs and ETMs are proposing. And unfortunately, the hard news is that that kind of money in those volumes, in that flavor, that price range, is just not available. When looking here on this graph, we have just sort of illustrated that, the grant levels of money. So this is sort of the technical assistance from multilateral development banks or philanthropies that are helping. It's kind of like the single digit billion level. The concessional finance that ADB provides to public sector borrowers or World Bank, that's really in the low double-digit billions. If you look at the JETP proposal for Indonesia alone, $20 billion, that's almost equivalent to the Asian Development Bank's entire annual program for all 46 countries across every sector that they support: education, health, energy, transport. So looking to that to fill the void is going to be, it's only for certain catalytic aspects of these transactions. On the other far end of the spectrum, we have the private sector capital, which is in the trillions, and it's in many forms, vast sums of money, but it requires specific characteristics from their investments to make them happen. And that's where we have this missing middle, which are the blended finance structures that blend the concessional finance, provide guarantee facilities or something to de-risk the JETP and the transition opportunities to bring in those trillions of dollars from the private sector. But okay, so that sounds all, we've heard a lot of that talk before, but what does that look like? What does the private sector want in the transition, particularly the foreign private sector that's coming in with green investments? And really what they are looking for in the context of, say, a JETP are the green projects. They're really in it for doing the transition so there's a clean outcome. And nearly all the investors, I'm not going to say all, but nearly all, want to support those renewable energy projects, those energy efficiency projects, the electrification projects that was being discussed earlier. They're interested because those fundamentals of that make sense in the context of the transition paradigm. Their reputations are at stake. They've made promises to their shareholders and that their strategy is going to be sustainable. And so when they make those statements, multinationals in particular that are listed on major stock exchanges actually may have to answer to those regulators and the shareholders why they are or are not achieving those claims. Now, you have sitting around the table in the JETP discussions a bunch of private sector lenders and investors who are actively looking at the retirement mechanisms David was mentioning just previously. But in my discussions with them, they were saying to me that these are sort of like a necessary evil. Like the dirty stuff is a great means to an end to accelerate the decarbonization pathway, but as an investment on their own, they're worried about it because they don't want to necessarily get stuck with a dirty portfolio without the counterbalancing green. So to do that together, to match that up timing-wise and project-wise and from a systems perspective, megawatt-hour-wise, takes a lot of complex coordination, and that's where de-risking these transactions comes in. You need the transaction elements to fit together in a financially sound way as well as an environmentally sound way. And that requires really sound forward-looking policy backed by support from government and multilaterals to make sure that that gets done. And then the private sector is willing to come in because there's a lot of complex changes that we've been talking about here in policy all at the same time. Will those stick? Will they stay on for the long term? It's hard to say. So the private sector is like, I can't wear that risk. I need someone who can partner with me to share that risk. So this comes to some recommendations. On the finance side, there's a few finance suggestions and a couple policy and planning suggestions. One is to make better use of the MDB partnerships and development partnerships that exist. I believe that there should be a demand for the MDBs to help make blended finance a reality by making better use of guarantee products. They currently don't use these products very much. Across all the multilateral development banks, guarantee facilities account for less than 3% of total portfolio. And these are the things that can actually de-risk the thing that all the risk that the JETPs are looking to share, the private sector is looking to share under a JETP. And this means, and the reason this is justified was because the MDBs have been working with all of the ASEAN countries for decades. They know you well. They know the governments well. They know the policies. They helped you develop the policies that you needed. And because of that, that familiarity gives a great foundation for sharing the risk that comes with implementing these policies and the investments that come out of those policies. This doesn't mean that MDBs should put all their eggs in that basket. The countries of ASEAN, can benefit from the traditional lending and project support products that David had mentioned, like in the Cambodia example. The solar park idea is a perfect example of a public-private partnership blend that needs to be replicated 1,000 times throughout ASEAN. But then you have to fund those projects, and you want to tap into that private sector capital that's willing to come in. Another method that we see as important is creation of national green development banks that are funding projects that are within the parameters of the country's green taxonomy, their green and decarbonization plans. Now, we're very fortunate today to have Pradana from PTSMI. This is the thing that PTSMI was meant to do. But if you work together with the MDBs and bilateral development banks to push money into these green banks, they can provide a co-finance product at a lower price that is financing with the private sector capital to get an overall lower cost of capital to a project, and do so in local currency in order to avoid the mismatch that comes from borrowing in foreign currency. Those are just a couple of ideas on how to catalyze projects, but you need projects to invest into. And that's where having this is like takes a big page out of the PPP structural playbook. And PPPs succeed because a government has realistic national plans where they allocate the best projects to public-private partnerships, the ones that have the most potential of succeeding, have clear objectives and processes to implement them, backing it up. This transition is no different. It's another way of doing PPP, but you have to have those really sound fundamentals in your plans. You are going to decarbonize. You will increase, renewables by X% by this year and that year. You will dedicate certain public funds in parallel to improving grid conditions to allow that to happen. These sort of plans are extremely important. That gives a clear signal to private sector investors that, yes, the risks that they're worried about are being addressed, that if they come in, they will be met by a partner who's interested in achieving the same goals they are. But, and it's hard. I've worked on developing national PPP plans from the law up to the implementing rules, the institutional design, and right through bidding. And staying that course, being almost formulaic about it, but doing so such that it creates a playbook. It's transparent. Everyone knows how to go forward. You put in a bid, it will be evaluated fairly. The contract is clear. The contract is publicly available so that everyone knows what the rules are, the cost, the benefits, the risks, and the rewards. And that's what private investors want to see. The more of that they see, the easier it is for them to say yes and put their vast sources of capital towards these projects. I would also caution countries against trying to be too clever on say prolonging or delaying the transition by labeling things that are green, not green, to be green, because your counterparts are as equally well informed about things as you are. And that's going to breed distrust. That's going to breed difficulties. And it's hard enough to get these things done, and it takes a long time to get them done. So you want to create the most frictionless, worry-free environment possible. And if you create those conditions, the money will flow. And it is in everyone's interest to see that done. So I will leave that there. And I'd be pleased later to go into more detail on how you do this sort of thing, if that's, and how you do that with national government entities. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant, for your excellent presentation, particularly in showing us the trends of ESG bonds issuance in the region, and also the importance of taxonomies, for reference for investors of what is green, what is not green, and in which actually Indonesia has just also published its own taxonomies in January 2022. And finally also of, taking us to what really private investors want, in investments. And you took the case of JETP as a reference, to why it's still pretty much not going anywhere at the moment, But at the end of the day, we appreciate your 4 recommendations that could be the solutions to some of the bottlenecks that we face in this issue. But let's wait for the Q&A, and I hope, Grant, you can join us for the next 2 hours, and hope you also have some coffee enough to put yourself, stay awake, and maybe just close to midnight in Buffalo, New York. But next, let's fly back to Indonesia. We've listened to the first 2 speakers giving us an overview of the ASEAN regions and also on the project's success story across the region for this energy transition projects. So now let's fly back to Indonesia. We have the next 2 speakers from Indonesia that represents basically one from the sort of like the private arm of the special purpose vehicle to conduct all this investment in the energy transition projects from PT SME, and that is with Pradana, Murti. So he will provide us insights on effectively managing investment funds to accelerate the energy transition. It's essential to include details on available schemes and the necessary requirements to access financing. In addition, PT SME will present the potential of PPP projects in the energy sector as an alternative financing option to drive energy transition. Mr. Pradana will also include an updated list of current energy projects conducted under PPP in collaboration with the PT SME. So, Mr. Pradana, you have about 15 to 20 minutes to present, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Pak Inka. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. And as I go third, it's after David and Grant, so it makes my life easier. So I don't need to explain about the concept too much and the reasons, so I can focus more on what has been done and being done by PTSMI. If I can have my slides up, please. Okay, next slide. So, well, I will later go to what SMI as National Development Bank, as well as Country Platform Manager for ETM, it's been busy, on as well as our previous endeavors in the energy sectors, that we can actually take lessons learned from. But I would like to start by reminding everyone that this is what we are ultimately trying to achieve here, which is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And the latest enhanced NDC, we see that the forestry is still the biggest contributors and the biggest potential for greenhouse gas reduction in Indonesia. And the Indonesia forestry sector is very important to the world because we have the second biggest forestry area in the world. But after the forestry sectors comes energy and transportation. So we are still a significant sector to contribute to the reduction in greenhouse gas emission. Yeah. Next. Now, we know that the energy transition roadmap has not been released officially by ASDM, as well as the new revised RUPTL by PLN. But we are looking at several scenarios on top of the business as usual in terms of the funding needs for energy transitions. Yeah. In this slide alone, which is pretty much still focused on the supply side, yeah, how to reduce fossil fuel generations capacity, as well as how to scale up the renewable energy generation capacity. So we are talking in the time horizon of, I believe it's up to 2040. So we are looking at these numbers basically. The funding gap is quite significant. So we are seeing that JETP is just still one of the solutions at the moment. Yeah. So and JETP alone has terms and conditions that needs to be met by assets to receive its financings. Yeah. And we're still working together with JETP Secretariat and how that terms and conditions will form ultimately. But again, this is just showing the magnitude and the needs for keep inviting non-state budget funding to the energy transitions. Next. Now, this is critical review from IEA on mobilizing private investment for energy transitions. Yeah. So if I can pick up 4 major points. The first one is the need for creating enabling environment for private investment and strengthen the institutions. And the government is trying to respond on this, yeah, by enacting the country platform for ETM, yeah, and assigning PTSMI as the manager. So essentially, Indonesia now have a focal point for a blended finance approach for energy transitions. So that's number 1. Yeah. Number 2 is there's a need for larger quantities of concessional finance, also de-risking mechanism, yeah, that goes as part of this blended finance approach. And this is the task that country platform, including SMI, is assigned to do, which is to explore all sources of funding as well as the potential facilities that can be formed out of it. And the third part is the new green financing instruments, yeah, as well as platforms. We're talking about green bonds, sustainability-linked loans, carbon credits, yeah. So with the country platform, government now has also a focal point to be innovative, yeah. Trying to issue instruments that goes along the green theme. Actually, just a couple of days ago, SMI signed a 700 million USD worth of syndicated sustainability-linked loan in USD. So it comprises of 40 different banks from the regions who are subscribed to this sustainability loan that is called by SMI. Aside from that, we have already worked on SDG Indonesia One blended finance platform since 2018. Yeah, it already amasses 3.2 USD billion worth of pledges from different donors and funders. However, the disbursement is still 10%, more or less. I will come to that later. And then the deeper capital market and financial systems. So we want to engage with local banks, local institutional investors to deepen the market, trying to get them to invest in energy transitions. And the counter platform is aiming to do that. And one of the products that we have done in the past is, the example is a credit enhancement scheme, whereby a renewable energy developer would like to issue bonds. But like most of renewable energy developers in Indonesia, only a few of them are just barely investment grade. And that's only on Indonesian standards, not on global standards. So how come they can get, or they can access cheap funding if they are barely investment grades? So credit enhancement is critical, therefore, and we have tried to test it a couple of years ago when a local developers issued a bond. Initially, their credit rating is single A domestically, and when we provide a credit enhancement, it can go up to AAA. So those kind of innovation is needed to deepen the market, as well as to provide or empower developers to access cheap capital. Next. This is just the things that we've worked on and keep working on. So we've mobilized funding. Yeah, I think SMI is also the first corporation in Indonesia to issue local green bond back in 2018. In project development, we are also the first accredited entity by GCF, and we have provided project preparation facility to a BRT system in Semarang, say for example, so we can actually utilize this for energy transition as well. We have geothermal fund to de-risk and project develop exploration activities. In the de-risking, we have collaborated with World Bank, GCF, GEF, in trying to de-risk the geothermal explorations. Policy advice, of course, and innovations. Yeah. Next. Now, this is one slide that would paint a picture of what energy transition mechanism counter platform is about and where does it sit and how it relates to JETP, because there's still a lot of misconceptions between ETM and JETP. Yeah. So basically the counter platform sits in the middle between the assets on the left, which is PLN projects or IPP projects, and the source of fundings on the right, which can come from the government, commercial sources, JETP or others, and philanthropies, donors and impact funds and so on and so forth. Yeah. So these funds can be channeled through the projects either directly or indirectly through the country platform. But I just want to remind everyone that SMI is still a 7.5 billion USD company. So to receive all of the funding for energy transitions through PTSMI balance sheet is stupid. So basically, we want to create a blended finance mechanism or schemes that can actually be the most effective, the most optimum to the assets itself. Yeah. So it doesn't have to go through the country platform, the money, but the country platform, because it consists of government of Indonesia, the policymakers, as well as SMI, the private arms of governments, we can create this kind of facilities that, together with the funders, solve the needs of the assets, from low-cost financing, technical assistance, de-riskings, and others. Yeah. On top of that, there's carbon potential as well, because the potential for carbon from energy transition is huge. So we need to capitalize it. Yeah. So we need to take advantage of it. But this is something that's still a work in process. And in the area of coal phase out, say for example, there's still a challenge, yeah, and how to actually claim the carbon credit of a coal early termination project, say for example. Yeah. Next, this is just one slide showing what SMI full activity. But I just want to highlight that SMI realized that the problem is not in the financing, because we have our core business in the financing and investment. But actually the problems pretty much resides on the pre-financing stage, which is how good the quality of project preparation itself. So that's why we have advisory activity and we have project development activity, including for PPPs. Yeah. So going to the next slide. This is the example of the PPP projects preparations that we have conducted over the years since 2011. As you can see, SMI has provided project development facility for 22 projects. But since 2011, only 7 got financed, constructed, and some already operated. So it means that it is very, very difficult to actually get the projects prepared up to the standard that it can be financed. So it needs to be feasible as well as bankable. Much of the problem resides on the project preparations, which is handled by the public sector. A lot of regulations need to be complied. A lot of approval needs to be obtained, not just from the executive, but from the legislative. Yeah. So that's why sometimes it takes 2 years, even more, to prepare one project to be able to offer that to the market. But usually when it's offered to the market, it goes well. So the investors will see the feasibility and the bankability aspect of the projects. Next. Just want to highlight one example because this is an energy sector. We have several waste to energy projects, but I'd just like to highlight street lighting projects, PPP projects, which is energy efficiency projects. The idea is simple. If you've gone to Solo, so Surakarta, you realize that at night Solo is quite remang-remang, ya Pak? Quite dark. It's okay. I'm from Solo as well, so I have no complaint. But things can be improved, yeah. Things can be better, by which we can change the light bulbs across Solo, which predominantly still use mercury, to LED, and then we can reallocate the locations of the lamp posts to make it even, so the lighting can be spread out evenly. So the idea is simple and will require a budget of 300 billion IDR, and the investments offered to the private sectors, including 2 years of constructions and 50 years operations. And to take out risk from private sectors, this project is being structured as availability payment. So it means that the payment comes directly from the local budget. So this is simple, yeah. But the challenge is, okay, regulations, compliance, yeah, checklist, but the funding allocation is problematic because usually cities in Indonesia has small funding envelope for street lighting. But if we want to provide availability payment structure in the amount of 300 billion over 15 years, so this funding envelope sometimes not enough. Yeah, so it requires a lot of discussion in the local parliament to get it approved. So the funding commitment for 15 years. So this is the process that one project has to go through to get it offered to the market. Yeah. But for this project, this is already passed the parliament, already have the shortlisted bidders, but there's a change in leadership in the city and a change of idea on how to finance the project. But this is just showing that how the difficulties that projects needs to go through before it can be feasible and bankable. Next. Now this is, I think it's my last slide. Just a couple of lessons learned from PTSMI and trying to finance energy transitions. One, of course, we need to reduce the cost of financing. It doesn't help. We are in the period of high interest rate at the moment globally. But this is one of the key targets to aim, reducing cost of financing, allowing projects to be feasible, basically. And government needs to show its commitments because we cannot attract low-cost financing from non-government if the government don't provide actually the same. So that's one. The second is early retirement or coal phase out or whatever it is has proven to be problematic, as Grant already mentioned earlier. That there's two things that needs to be unlocked here. One is the taxonomy to allow coal phase out included in the taxonomy. Well, ASEAN already shown a good leadership in this. They already updated their green taxonomy into a sustainable taxonomy and included coal retirement as well in there. OJK is following suit. Yeah. And the second part is the carbon. If carbon can be claimed, carbon credit can be claimed by a coal retirement project, then this can show that this investment opportunity is credible enough for private investors or external funding to come in. And the third is boosting renewable energy investment. I've shared that Isdijoso Indonesia won 3.2 billion, already dispersed only 10%. So it means that financing renewable energy is difficult. To get a feasible and bankable project in renewable energy is still difficult. Only a handful of developers are credit worthy, and the projects sometimes are full of risks. There's technology, land acquisition, everything, of fuel supply. So it needs a lot of good quality project preparations. Yeah. And then scaling up multi-sector participations to introduce instruments in the market, yeah. Sustainable link loan, green bond, and so on and so forth. And then last but not least is credit risk mechanism. So it needs a good bankability enhancement, credit enhancement sometimes to actually boost the credit worthiness of the projects, and at the end also reducing the cost of financing. That's from me. Hope it's useful. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Pak Pradana, for sharing your wonderful presentations, particularly in all the initiatives that PT SME has done through pushing forward, the energy transition program, through blended finance schemes, the credit enhancement. I think that's very also important to increase or obtain a higher level of bond rating to attract private investors to come in, and also for also sharing with us some of the current PPP projects in Indonesia. So next, and our final speaker is from the Ministry of Finance. Typically in many events, conference, government officials is put first to speak, but now, just for this case, the government official will be put last, just because so that we want to know the regulatory framework for this energy transition mechanism, and how we can get detailed information of the PPP schemes offered to investors and how they can benefit both parties, from the private as well as the public sector, and at the end of the day, how to boost energy transition development. So I would like to welcome Pak Slamet from the Ministry of Finance to present for 15 to 20 minutes. Pak Slamet, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pak Inka. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. Firstly, I have to say that in the government sector, especially in the Ministry of Finance, there are various units who in charge regarding the ETM. So I need to mention that I come from the unit that the mandate is to provide and manage the government support for PPP project. So maybe I'm going to tell you about highlighting of the PPP project. I also want to give some case study in the energy sector, and also I will talk about how to leveraging the PPP scheme and the government support to support the ETM mechanism. Can you go to my slide, please? To slide, next slide, please. Next, please. Yeah, talking about the PPP, I hope that my presentation will give some certain degree of answer to what previously mentioned by speakers. There are some kind of issue that need to be done. So next slide, please. When talking about the PPP scheme in Indonesia, heavily, we are already in the proven capacity. I mean that the policy was initiated in 2005 and currently more than 15 years. We have 4 pillars currently in terms of regulatory framework. We always talking about the legal basis. All the legal basis here, including the operational guideline from Bappenas and also MOF regulation regarding the government support that I will share you later. The second part of the pillar is the institutional arrangement. My colleague here, Pak Pradana, is from the PT SMI, one of the special mission vehicle under the Ministry of Finance. And also we have something like IIGF doing the guarantee process for the infrastructure, and also Elman. Elman is like providing land clearing fund for the infrastructure in Indonesia. And because there are many sectors in infrastructure, currently we focus on some sector that very urgent to be done, which is the basic necessities like drinking water, healthcare, and urban issues like urban transport, mass management, housing, and gas distribution. But we also open to other sector that it become the government priority as well. In the left-hand side, in the bottom side, fiscal government support. I will talk about that more in the next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is a typical project structure and financing structure on the PPP project around the world, and including in Indonesia. I would like to emphasize 2 parties in the top hand side, right hand side, which is lenders and equity investor. I may guess that most of you here is from the private sector, and we understand that the main concern of the private sector when doing business is profit. The second was about the risk of their investment. We understand that. That's why we in the Ministry of Finance offers many kind of government supports in the left-hand side of the slide. Various support, I can divide it into three categories. The first one is the project development facilities. It provides any support, technical support, consultant to provide, to develop, document, anything, regulation that need to be done before the tender process, including the PPP agreement itself. The second one is the viability gap facility. The main focus of this facility is to make the project financially feasible. We understand that many kind of infrastructure projects are not really good in terms of financial feasibility as, let's say in the water supply project, the tariff for the 1 cubic meter water is just around 5,000 rupiah, and the investment can go up to 2 trillion, 3 trillion rupiah. That's why viability gap facility come to make the finance feasibility, better financial visibility for the investor. The third one is support in terms of credit enhancement facility. We are talking about the risk. Everything okay, but when lenders come to the project, they see that there are more and more uncertainty in the project. I believe that lender won't come to the project. Lender wants something certain. That's why we provide a government guarantee here together with PT PII or Indonesia Infrastruktur Guarantee Fund. We provide guarantee for certain amount of risk, certain kind of risk for any PPP project in Indonesia. We also have what we call it a availability payment scheme. It's basically what earlier mentioned by Pak Pradana in the Surakarta Lightning project. It is a mechanism that when the project doesn't have payment or doesn't have revenue from the user, the government taking action to pay regularly every year during the operation. That's the availability payment process, or we call it the government payment. And also, as already mentioned, we have infrastructure financing, private arm of the government like PT SMI and its subsidiary, and also PT PII. Next slide, please. Talking about collaboration that I mentioned earlier by the previous speakers. In the PDF process, one of the government support I mentioned before, Ministry of Finance has already have some collaboration with international institution. In the right-hand side, we have the World Bank together with us doing the OBC for the Cisaranten housing project. We also have a very good experience with the IFC doing the transaction advisor in the Central Java power plant. And currently, we are also in the collaboration in the partnership with the ADB and also JICA and IFC for the development of the South Tangerang West project and Legok Nangka West project respectively. Next slide, please. This is current situation about the existing BPP project pipeline which obtain government support. So we only provide this excluding any PPP project in Indonesia who doesn't obtain government support. That's many more. But we are focusing on our mandate that when we provide the government support in terms of PDF, VGF, or guarantee, we closely monitor of the process. We make an evaluation, a regular evaluation for the process. We doing the bottlenecking issue, something like that, until the project's going smooth and run to deliver the service to the public. You can see that during the last decades, maybe we have 32 projects signed right now. Some of them under construction, some of them has been operating. And some of them, 22 projects currently under preparation. You can see all over the Indonesian region, Sumatra until Maluku. Some of the projects provide not all the support, but based on the needs of the very specific project requirement. Something interesting here is that not much energy project here comparing to water and road. I think before I questioned by the audience, I will make some question to all of you here. Why? Why only, let's say, 2 energy projects and 1 energy efficiency here? That's a big question that need to be discussed. Next slide, please. Based on our experience so far when doing the transaction of the PPP project in Indonesia, so many challenges and some other are the key success factor that we already have. In the left-hand side, the success factor is, I think, it's obvious. Yeah. We have sound PPP framework and program. We also have some kind of self-belonging between stakeholders. PPPs Indonesia is being well known right now. Everybody look at it, everybody want to try. And also the number 3, we need to have a dedicated government project sponsor or some unit from the government that will sign the contract with the private sector. The commitment of them. And also, we also have the dedicated resource to properly structure tender process. As I mentioned before, this is the PDF facility. And something that I need to emphasize here is also what mentioned previously by Grant. It's about the quality element. Ministry of Finance currently already have ESG manual and framework to be applied to all the projects in Indonesia obtaining government support, especially from the Ministry of Finance. You can download it at advertisement kbbu.kemenkeu.go.id. You can go there. And talking about challenge, this is quite obvious also, but I need to mention again that the commitment of the GCA, like Pak Pradana mentioned before, in his case study project, the commitment is the paramount factor to successful of the project. And also from the point of view of the supply side, we need more and more long-term financing market. Again, local political dynamic, leader change in the local government, it significantly affects the progress of the project. And also some GCA might experience indecisiveness when there is a recommendation that need to be picked to make the project faster and faster. Next slide, please. This is so far the only energy sector PPP project in Indonesia. Next slide, please. Until this project reaching the commercial operation date in the last year, there is no other energy PPP project in Indonesia. Still, this is a big question for us, Indonesia. Something that you want to know about is about how this project can be closed and can be dealt in a very good manner. Is that I need to mention again that we have a strong project preparation here in collaboration with the IFC starting from 2011. Number 2 is about government guarantee to taking the risk of the project. This project obtained 2 types of guarantee. One is from the IEGF and the second one from the Ministry of Finance directly. So there are 2 guarantee agreements in the project embedded to the PPP agreement. The coverage is political risk. Guarantee tenor for the equity is 16 years, and for the debt portion is 21 years. So the coverage of the guarantee, it's all about the PLN payment obligation in the BPA, including obligation to purchase the electricity, dim dispatch, buyout if there is a termination of the project, and also obligation to pay due to the PLN even of default. What not covered in this guarantee is seller even of default. I think it is clear. Tax, we also not guarantee the tax, and also the indemnity. Next slide, please. This is something I also need to emphasize, Pak David, especially you mentioned about the risk of the project. Risk allocation is the most important thing that we need to look at when developing the project. As you can see, most of the risk has been shared between the parties. Just small of them bear by the private sector. It means that public and private have very good collaboration in doing all these things to share the risk and make all this arrangement into the guarantee agreement and also the PPP agreement. Again, I need to mention that the initiator of the project, the government contracting agency, come from the sector, which is in this case, PT PLN has been very good in initiating the project. Next slide, please. This is some takeaways about the CGPP project. I think the achievement already mentioned many times in the media, and the impact of the society is very, very good. But something that I need to emphasize that there are national program level takeaways and sectoral project level takeaways. Both of them have to be aligned each other. Let's say when we start the PPP project in 2011, nobody have some optimism, but at the time we just starting project. We can learn by the time. And also, as I mentioned before, we need a very good and flexible risk allocation. Flexible means we have to open, the parties need to open, because when talking about risk allocation, the principle is it should be allocated to the party that have the capability to control the risk. We also provide fiscal support in this project. And also, we're doing a very good in the, let's say, multi-stakeholder and social assessment of the project. So the case of riot, etc., is minimal in this project. From this project sectoral, I think the commitment of the APL and the GCA is a paramount, and there are some detail in the transaction like a negotiation, competitive bidding, credible project preparation is also something that we can neglect. Next slide, please. After talking about the PPP and one successful project in the energy sector, I think how we can connect the dot to leveraging the ETM mechanism in Indonesia. Next slide, please. I think everybody here know about the objective. Pak Pradana also mentioned about the objective to reduce greenhouse, etc. So I just move to next slide, please. This is a kind of update in Indonesian ETM right now. Since I think in the last 2 or 3 years ago, in G20 meeting, the ETM has been recognized, and also we have a country platform with the PT SMI as the country manager. We also have the pilot project. I think Pak Pradana can talk about that, about the pilot project, and also some development of the CC currently available. Next slide. Again, I think it's going to be my final slide, but I want to again emphasize that the commitment of the government, the commitment to support the ETM, the fiscal support, the guarantee, it's all in place. Currently delivering many projects. The question is, what can be done from the government point of view and also from the private point of view to make a real transaction? I use this terminology because when we are talking about fund in any country, there is no transaction, there is no fund going into the project. So other than the facilities and government support for the PPP scheme in Indonesia in the right-hand side, it's all applicable to the ETM project. I need to emphasize this. All applicable PPP support and government support eligible for the ETM project. Beyond that, we also have some kind of instrument that can be used in the context of blended finance, such as we have geothermal fund mentioned before, and also the business viability guarantee letter for the geothermal development. We also have a government guarantee for direct lending when direct loan from the international finance going to the SOE, we can provide the guarantee. And also something that maybe doesn't exist right now, but we can develop further based on the need of the party specific sector, especially ETM. I still have to set left, but I think you can read by yourself later. I will stop here. Thank you, Pak Inka.
Thank you, Pak Slamet. Please give a big round of applause to Pak Slamet. So we come to the end of the presentations, and it's, we've heard a lot. I personally think that, all the four presentations are excellent. It gives us an overview of the current challenges, issues, and some policy recommendations to remedy, the obstacles that we face. And we've heard of, many projects. Pak Slamet, in his last presentations, have shown 54 projects, PPP in Indonesia, in which I think 22 are managed by PT SME. The 54 projects are, of course, in different stages at the moment. And then, we've heard earlier of the Cambodian solar panel park project as well. So hopefully, these projects can be catalysts, or success stories that we can replicate for other projects to come. And then, we've also heard about the government regulation, institutional arrangement from Pak Slamet. And but I'm sure you probably have a lot of questions on that too. So now we come to the fun part, and that is the Q&A and discussion session. We have about 1 hour. I can give you 60 full minutes because usually in classrooms I do cold calls, but I think we are all adults in this room, so I'm sure some of you have long questions to these four great speakers. And don't forget, we also have Grant in Buffalo, New York. He's staying up quite late for you guys, ladies and gentlemen in this room. So just the order for the Q&A discussions, please state your name and affiliation, and to whom your question is directed to. And so let me begin with the first round of questions. Let me start from the right side. Wow, plenty of hands. Okay, let me go you first, since you raised your hand, and then, okay, the front gentleman. Let me go 4 questions first, from the right 2, and then from the left side. Okay, you gentlemen, the 2 gentlemen, you can, put up your first question. So,
okay, thank you.
I think the microphone will be brought to...
I'm the first, sorry.
Oh, you're the first?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay. And then, okay, so you'll be the second, yeah. So
yes,
sorry.
Thank you very much,
okay,
Mr. Inka. I'm Arul Rahim from METI, Masyarakat Energi Terbarukan Indonesia. In English, Indonesian Renewable Energy Society. The only one society for renewables. Yeah? And Actually, I have a company. We are the player of renewables. We involve in the hydro and solar PV. It's very nice dialogue today. It's about optimizing multilateral collaboration and public-private partnership to both energy transition. Any from IDB, Mr. David? Yes, with JP, yeah? Just Energy Transition Partnerships. Pradana from SMI. I know well SMI. It's a state-owned company. Talking about energy transitions, what do you want to transit from our energy today? You're talking about financing. There is no project that you want funding now. If you go to the PLN asking renewable energy, the latest one that PLN offering is hydro, 250 megawatt around Sumatra. And the other side, last year, PLN announced 1,600 coal-fired power plant in Sumatra Selatan 1 and Sumatra Selatan 8. What do you mean? Indonesia is still burning coal fires, still make a pollution to around the world. We live in the one earth. Talking about renewables is bullshit today. You can not my mobile, then I will respond to my comments. My mobile is 08 567 588 and 688. Okay, I know JP well. I know SMI well. If you're talking about funding for Pradana, what's the difference between SMI and the commercial bank? There is no very big difference. It's the same. We have many projects that went unsuccessfully to get the finance from SMI. It's a renewables. So, I think no need to talking much today. We should go together with the PLN. We should go to the Minister of ESDM, Energy and Mineral Resource, and we go to the Minister of Finance, Ibu Sri Mulyani. Ibu Sri Mulyani talked in my conference, AB the Connex, last month, that if you want to involve in net zero emissions, Indonesian will need 4,000 trillion rupiah. How to get the fund? How to get the fund? Until 2050. It's a big amount. In the other side, we abandon the coal. In the other side, that many projects for the coal fire will come to the grid. So, what are we talking about? Financing for renewables? You can see what happened in the world today. When Russia is stopping to send gas to Europe, what did Europe do? They burning coal fire for plant. So, who create the energy transition? Americans, Europeans, or Indonesian? We are in the some earth. We should talk much about all the stakeholders, PLN, governments, funding providers, like JP from ADB, SMI from Indonesia. So I think the guys from Pradana, or from JP, ADB, okay, you can comment my commenter. Thank you very much.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir, from Murti. Thank you also for sharing your cell phone to everyone here. But I believe the question is directed pretty much, I think, to everyone, if everyone can answer, his concern, particularly maybe also from Grant. Maybe you can see how the geopolitics, in Europe and US against, the emerging countries and developing countries in terms of setting the policies, for this. energy transition mechanism. Okay, next, please, gentlemen in the front. Please state your name, affiliation, and the questions that you are directed to.
Yes, thank you. My name is Yuli from Institut Teknologi Bandung. My short question is about the clean coal technology. Because we have a lot of coal, I want to know how about the investor perception or opinion about the clean coal? Because Indonesia has a lot of coal. And number two is, how about the co-firing technology? Right now, some of the power plant use coal-firing technology. They mix biomass with the coal, and in the future they want to increase the mixing. How about the opinion about this? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Yuri. Maybe just a little bit adding to that question from myself too, because I'm giving up my first right of refusal to ask the panelists here, because I know a lot of questions in terms also from the coal. Can it be green? Can it be green in taxonomies? I think that's a relevant question too from my side to add to Pak Yuri's question. To the left side, I think the two individuals. Yeah, go ahead. The blue shirt. Go ahead.
Thank you, Pak. My name is Hardif from Indonesian Electrical Power Society. My question for friend from ADB and SMI and Finance Department. As you know that this is right now we are not in the good paths, long-term paths. Global Stocktake, the first Global Stocktake report, the climate change action is not enough, to limit the global warming temperature less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. So what we need right now is global coherent action and very clear what is the objective. Many people discuss about energy transition. What is the objective of energy transition? We have to make it clear about this. So, like the IPCC report also, the path is what we need is 1.5 degree. Global warming is no more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. So we have to make it clear. I give you an example here. It is for SMI and also for finance, friend from finance department, that IEA made study, Indonesian energy transition outlook, and also IRENA. IRENA made 1.5 degree, IEA 2 degrees Celsius. Net zero emission, IRENA make it 2050, but IEA make it 2060. So at national level, so many discussing right now whether we are net zero emission in 2060 or 2050. Very clear right now, like JETP, when they make it press release last February, they make it for power sectors, we need deep decarbonization with the peaking 2030 and net zero in 2050. So I would like to talk to SADB. When you have, before you make engagement, did you check for certain country, for example, did you check also before making engagement, what is actually the target? What is the peaking? What is the net zero? And the second also, if you have time, just reading the UNEP report, emission gap report. What they propose is the long-term emission paths need to be least cost principle. So ETM, if you go to engagement to certain country, did you check also what is the long-term emission paths? It is least cost or not? So ini juga Pak ya untuk SMI dan Departemen Keuangan. Tolong dilihat, what is the target? For example, national for the sector energy sector. What is where is the peak? When the peaking? When also the net zero? Memang belum ada peraturan sekarang perpresnya, but this is very clear. We need very clear because we are as a part of global coherent action. Whether the path is least cost long-term emission paths, when the peaking, whether 2030 or net zero 2050, this is actually will be discussed, yeah, in Dubai COP28 to make it to support in line with Glasgow Climate Pact. Nah, itu Pak, jadi harus dilihat ini Pak. Jadi coordination, harmonization between the sector is very important at national level. Yeah, we have to check the target of the emission transition, and also we have to see also whether this is enriching the least cost long-term emission paths. This is very clear. So my friend, please check also before making engagement whether this is in line with this thinking. Thank you, Pak.
Okay, thank you, Pak Hadif. So I think your question is more of what is the long-term emission path and the least cost emission path. Yeah. Okay. In this first session, I think the gentleman on the left, yeah, the brown, light brown shirt.
Okay, so thanks very much for Mr. Moderators for allowing me to raise the last question here. And also very much thank you as well for all presenters for the nice introduction and also presentation. I actually have two questions. And okay, so my name is Akbar Swandaru, and currently I work as a freelance researcher, so I'm moving around, but currently I'm working at the ADB. So I have two questions, but since the first question has been asked by one nice gentleman over there from IDB, so my second question goes to something like this. So if you take a look at the ASEAN level, you may see that ASEAN member states start to embracing renewable energy technology to enter energy transition in some progress. And I see that this has been clearly marked into the government manifesto. So if you take a look at the power development plan, like Indonesia, for instance, we have green RUBTL since the last 2 years, 2021. And if you take a look at Vietnam, you may see that we have PDB number 8. So those have clear intention to embrace net zero emission. Now, I see that this has been a clear mark since in 2020. We see that if you recall the news, the Vietnam solar boom, we see that there is a huge achievement at the ASEAN. You may see that we have like around 80 gigawatts of capacity consists of wind, solar, that has been successfully implemented within only 1 year. And that year, if you take a look there, it's during pandemic, right? Now, if you take a look there, you may see that there is one effective policy, and they call it like land lease exemption. So this is something that can be very much attractive for the private investors and also international investment. Of course, this is not something that you cannot like replicate to every ASEAN member state, and I'm not trying to somehow enforcing this for Indonesian government. But I would like to take a look at the Indonesian as a country, and hopefully my question is more like to provide for you to give an answer that is much more into layman's terms. So if you take a look all of this achievement, and some of countries start embracing renewable energy transition, what do you think the biggest hindering factors, or perhaps the biggest challenge for us to adopting technology and policy adoption for the use of renewable energy in Indonesia? I think that's my question. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Can you state your name again and where are you from?
My name is Akbar Swandaru. I'm freelance researcher. Okay. So technically I'm working at ADB now, but I'm moving around a little bit.
Okay. All right, so that's the first 4 questions, and don't worry, we will open up for another session of questions. So let's do it one by one. And the first one, of course, from the gentleman from MITI. The question is, in a nutshell, are we doing the right thing in Indonesia? You know, PLN and all these projects, are they really for renewables? Are they really projects that can help us to reduce emissions? And I think this can be answered from all the 4 speakers in the panel. So maybe let me begin first, of course, from the Indonesia side, from PT SME and from the Ministry of Finance.
Okay, thank you, Pak Inka. First, I would like to address Pak Arul Rahim, from METI. First is, I think the question is, there's not much, it's just all talks and not much action going on, Pak, in terms of transitioning from fossil fuel to renewable. And the fact the matter is, a lot more or bigger contracts are being delivered in fossil fuel, especially coals, rather than renewable. Yes, I can confirm that facts. Yeah, that's actually the things that I think is better asked to PLN and ASDM. Yeah, but I would like to give some personal insight, personal side on the matter. I think we are talking about still unlevel playing field, between fossil fuel and renewable. One from the economic of scale. One side, fossil fuel can generate hundreds, even thousands megawatts in just one site alone. But renewable, we need multiple sites, plus transmissions. So inherently, it's not a level playing field between fossil fuel and renewable. So if we want to be serious on renewable, we have to invest a lot more than fossil fuel. Yeah, and it comes back to PLN trilemma within energy security, affordability, and sustainability. We have a state budget is all limited, and we are from the finance, from MOF, ADB, SMI, and trying to attract financing is not easy. They all want to see renewable assets, but it's limited at the moment. And coal assets, they don't want to touch. Most of them from external funding, they don't want to touch coal asset, even though this is for early termination. Yeah. So it's not easy to generate external funding, non-government funding, and government funding is limited. So that's the whole story. Plus, the non-level playing field also exaggerated by the indirect subsidy enjoyed by fossil fuel, like DMO, for example. So this is very, very, if I'm government, I have a headache as well than trying to solve this. But this is the reality. I can confirm with you this is the reality. What we can do is whatever on the table, we'll have to deal with that one at a time. Yeah. And then about the difficulties in accessing SMI financing as well as lower than commercial financing. I get this all the time, but I've been speaker at EBTKI Connects and forums like this multiple years. Yeah, I've got this all the time. So what is the role of SMI? SMI is just like a bank. Yeah. Okay, Pak, I'll try to answer, Pak. So basically, first we are focused on infrastructure. So that's the difference between us and banks. We are focused on infrastructure while banks can do other things. Yeah. In terms of size, we are minute compared to banks. If we talk the 4 biggest banks in Indonesia, Himbara as well as BCA, we are only, in terms of market size, we are only 5% in infrastructure. So our muscle is very, very small compared to all the financing institutions combined in Indonesia. So we need to play with the market, not against the market. Yeah. It's not helpful if SMI provide a affirmative pricing to all projects. We are concessional to all projects that we finance. Then everyone will go to SMI. And SMI 7.5 billion assets is not enough to finance all the infrastructure needs in Indonesia. So we need to collaborate with banks and other financial institutions. So that's the fundamental answer. So what SMI do is to try to complement. Complements in the area of tenor. So banks usually can go up to 7. In rare cases, 10, 15 years tenor. SMI, the longest we've provide financing is 25 at the moment. So it depends case by case, but that's one target that we can actually provide, a longer tenor that is required by project. The second is the differentiation in products. So banks usually only stays at senior loan. We can provide junior loans as well as equity. That has been proven from SMI perspective, but that's at the moment largely in the toll road sector, Pak. At the moment, ya, Pak. But we are trying very hard to provide this junior financing as well as equity financing to energy sector. Why it's easier for us to go into a more risky transaction, more risky financing trans in the toll road sector, because one, they are more mature in terms of sectors, they are longer established than the energy sectors. Two, they provide longer concessions. So toll roads offers 30, 40, sometimes 50 years of concessions. It's much easier to actually provide a more junior financing that's usually get the returns longer than the senior lender. Yeah. So that's the structural answer to the sector. So that given that, we are still collaborating with other parties, including ADB, to provide all the necessary products that's required for energy sector, including what I have shared, yeah. So we provided like the de-risking mechanism for geothermal explorations. Again, it's difficult to implement because people would like to access that funding, would like to comply with World Bank environmental and social safeguard. So it takes a lot of effort from the developer. And then from investment grant, we have provided together with the UK Mentari program, investment grant to 3 hydropower, small hydropower projects to make the project feasible. So we have proven times and again, although still sparsely and we can count by hands the number of times that can happen, but we have proven that there are hopes to scale up renewable energy projects, although it will take time. And overall, since 2010, the first time we enter renewable energy projects, at the moment we have already amassed 1 gigawatt worth of energy projects that we are partially financed. Yeah. From hydro, solar, geothermal, biomass, and wind. So we are trying to do something. Let's keep on doing it. And I know it's not easy, but let's take part in whatever we can do. And then Pak Yuri from ITB, investor perception on clean coal and coal-firing. As government agent, we are very much interested, Pak, to try to take a look at these initiatives, yeah, and projects and technology. From investors and lenders' perspective, it needs to be proven, Pak. The technology needs to be proven. But let's go if we want to study further. SMI has established SMI Institute. We can collaborate, Pak. Actually, next week I'm going to meet Vice Director, Pak Professor Abduh. We want to try to collaborate with kind of technology that can be applied. So we can deep dive into that matter. Yeah. And then and the other part from Pak Adif and Pak Abbas, I think that relates to roadmap. Yeah, I don't have the answer because we need to wait from ESDM and PLN for that. Yeah. But perhaps Pak David or Pak.
Yeah, thank you. I think maybe next is Pak Slamet. Maybe you can answer 2 of the 4 questions relating to you. The first, of course, is can you entertain us and also Pak Abu Rahim on his concern that are we actually doing the right thing? Are we actually financing projects for transition to clean energy? And then second, I think from questions from Pak Hadif, on what is the least cost strategy for emission reductions in the long path. And then after that, I will turn over to ADB and Grant. Please, the floor is yours, Pak Slamet.
Yeah, Pak. Thank you, Pak. I think this is a very interesting question, and I hope this question was asked 15 years ago. Because let's come back to the 15 years ago when we are in the situation of shortage of electricity, infrastructure like service. At the time, the government tried really hard to fulfill all of the necessity for the society, water, electricity, and at the time, maybe I can say that our focus is not really green at the moment, but how to fulfill the basic necessity for the society. And then this question comes today, and yes, we are currently in the situation that the international market, the global society come into a conclusion that the climate change come into our table, and then we need to do our best effort to tackle this issue. And this is not only for us, but only for our next generation. We are talking about the environmental disruption. We're talking about climate disaster and so on. So I would say that from the government point of view, it is like the global responsibility because we are part of the global society. Unless we are to live in our own planet, not many country others. That's for my question, for the first question, Pak. And for the second question, what is the least cost when we are doing this kind of energy transition mechanism? I think I'm not going to be focused on the cost side of this part, because we are talking about the benefit of the long term. Again, currently we should stop any kind of fossil fuel unless if we cannot stop right now, as Pak David mentioned before, we can make a transition. That's why it's called transition, not just right now. We make a transition because you already maybe you already know that we are talking about the potential energy. Indonesia is the biggest potential in the geothermal. The question is why it's only just below 10% utilized currently. So it is our asset. We have a potential, but maybe the question is how to finance that. What is the cost? That's further question. Currently in the international market finance, the fund, a broad fund from international institution, they will not finance any kind of coal-fired power plant, let's say, or any other project that doesn't meet the green taxonomy or meet the requirement of the EAC. So it is like we have no choice at the moment that if we want to attract private sector, we want to attract private fund come to Indonesia, we need to do a greener environment and business environment. So we cannot we cannot go by ourselves. It is clear our state budget is not sufficient, and it's clear that we need private participation. That's why the policy and also the most important thing is the political will from the government. All level of the government need to be aligned with the national target. Thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Slamet. Okay, next let me go to David first. Okay, and maybe perhaps David, you can enlighten us on the second and fourth questions. The second question is also on clean coal technology. What can you do about it? And then the other one is basically what's the biggest challenge in the adopting technology in this issue? And perhaps you can also comment maybe on other questions if you have.
Sure, and thanks to the last two panelists, I think covered those very quite in detail. On biomass and clean coal, at the end of the day, it's emissions. So I don't have a problem with coal. I have a problem with the emissions and the resultant pollution. So if we can do CCUS, we can, I think, bring them down to very low. I think clean coal in itself, it's not enough to meet long-term climate goals. So that's my concern on that. Biomass, sustainability of biomass and local pollution. Those are the two things. There's stories of trying to shift to biomass in other countries, not in Indonesia per se, where they start mowing down forests in order to create the biomass feedstock to then burn it. Well, that's not a sustainable solution. That's just creating another problem to shift to biomass. So if the supply of biomass can be sustainable, if it can meet a CO2 and local air pollution criteria, I'm absolutely for it. It's about the output, not necessarily one solution versus the other. Carbon capture and storage is another example. I've worked in it for years. It's always steps out. It's years out. It's always an additional cost. Who's going to bear that cost in the absence of carbon markets? So, I'm critical of it and skeptical of it, unfortunately. In terms of the barriers, this goes to the comments from the first speaker and of course, the last person asking the question. We all know the structural constraints in Indonesia, whether it's the DMO, the tariffs, local content, all of these things are challenges. They're there for some good reasons, but they offer challenges to make the energy transition. At the end of the day, we need to deal with them in the context of how Indonesia wants to deal with them. And I think least cost focus is actually the wrong focus. We have to include all externalities. There was just an article highlighting, the costs of I think it was the Suralaya coal plants on the health system. All right, that's a rational approach. That's not good for society. That has a cost to society. How can we link the energy transition to better socioeconomic development for Indonesia? There's tremendous ambition in the clean energy sector for industrial development. That can be linked to energy transition, to the better socioeconomic development for Indonesia. I think it is a tremendous challenge globally. Grant can maybe comment on this as well. Unfortunately, no country is going to address climate change or for the world. How do we find ways to incentivize countries to do good to their benefit? And I think that's the best starting point. And I think we can look at examples of other countries. Vietnam's an interesting one. Huge investments in renewables, but there are some structural issues with that as well. They've put the dispatch risk on the developers, so that's good for the utility. If they don't buy the power, the developer loses money. So there's good projects who are making money, bad projects who are losing money. They went so far so fast, concerned with that. I don't think that's great to see the success, but I don't think it's necessarily a model we want to emulate everywhere. I would love to see more ambition in solar in Indonesia. I think the ambition is too low. And moving forward on that in a stepped, managed way can be done while keeping costs in line and energy stability or power sector stability. But right now, I think the ambition is too much on baseload.
Grant, I think you are still wide awake. Please respond to, I think this applies for you to all the 4 questions. So the first one, please take us on the global perspective, from the US government, European governments. Are we all doing the right things? I mean, are there differences between, advanced economies and the EDMEs in these kind of issues? And then the second is the clean coal technology. What do you think about it? The third question is, what is the least cost emission reduction policy for the long-term path? And the last but not least is, what is the biggest challenge in the adopting technology in this energy transition mechanism?
So let's be clear on this all. Everyone in the world is the same. All of our countries face the same issues. We have people who are anxious to transition and those who have vested interest who will resist it to their dying day. And it's a battle of not just money, but philosophy. And we see this in the pushback that the fossil fuel, in particular the oil and gas industry, is doing globally, makes this all muddled and confusing. However, what we can see is that there are things that work. Let's just take, if we look at, in the United States, Texas, the Texas grid is about, the installed capacity, I believe, is about 90 gigawatts. So in world rank, it would be about the 14th largest grid in the world. It operates almost like an island. It used to be fired a lot by coal and gas. Coal is gone in the last 15 years. It now has, in the middle of the day, it gets most of its energy from renewables, and they have massive wind farms and solar, and they've had some very high temperatures recently where, had they not had the solar, the grid would have failed. Now, the interesting thing here is that every day the sun shines, and often in Southeast Asia, our peak demand comes during the middle of the day. From an energy security perspective, having solar on rooftops, having solar on lakes, having solar in farms actually would be an energy security addition to the grid, not a detriment. And that will happen every day of the week. Somewhere in Indonesia, that will be providing energy security. What is not providing security right now is the excess capacity of coal on the grid. What I mean by that is financial insecurity. The IPP projects that exist in Indonesia now get capacity payments by their PPAs, regardless of whether or not they run. And you are in a severe oversupply situation on Java. So that is money that's effectively being paid out without necessarily full benefit coming to the grid or the people. But what does that mean? It means you have an unparalleled opportunity that doesn't exist in any other country in the region, where you have excess capacity. That means you have space, time, to actually do the renewables transition that we're talking about, while you have excess capacity before demand catches up to that. So I think, with a focus on the actual decarbonization targets, with a learning from around the region on how the bidding process, the development process works for renewables, while you have in parallel this phase down of certain coal-fired power plants, I think you could actually do it and come out economically better and decarbonized to a certain extent, at least on the pathway. So I'm optimistic on that. Now, again, keeping in the context of cost and security, let's talk about carbon capture for the current power plants. Not me, but my colleagues in IEEFA have done a body of research on the actual operations of carbon capture technologies on power, on processing and industrial processes. And unfortunately, the technology hasn't lived up to what it was built to do. Because, you say, oh, we're going to capture 90%. The actual numbers come in around 60 or 70, depends on the plant. I can actually give you some references to the research that was done. But the other thing is it's got the power penalty. Depending on the type of plant, temperature, conditions, whatever, the type of coal and the load that's being processed, you could have between 15 and 25% parasitic load on your plant. Add an additional cost of capital equipment and investment that will make your coal plant even more expensive. While you're doing this in an overcapacity situation in the Indonesian market, you could be doing renewables. One last thing. I love the idea that Pradana mentioned about getting carbon credits for the early retirement of coal plants, because I think it's a real thing. You are decarbonizing, and you're doing it early, and there's a cost and there's a benefit. We have a model for that came from the clean development mechanism back during the Kyoto Protocol era. If you have a formula on how that's supposed to work, it's verifiable, you should be able to sell a carbon credit behind it. What I think is a challenge, though, is trying to include coal in a clean taxonomy. My colleagues also have commented on that recently, last week, and the thing is that if you're trying to crowd in capital, green, clean capital, they're just not going to buy that. First of all, the investors won't buy that if that green is their agenda. Even if there's this carve out where you're saying, well, the coal plant is going to go on to a nickel smelter that's going to provide EV batteries. Okay, maybe the batteries will be part of an electrification and transformation effort, but coal is coal. And there's a price on that. And we just have to acknowledge that that is not clean, and we can't make it clean. And so it's just a hard reality, and we factor that in. We factor that into our pricing. It means you'll have a reduced universe of people who are willing to finance it, and the reduced universe, at least from a global perspective, and that reduced universe means that you'll have fewer people to bid and price that cost. I think this would all be cleared up and make it a lot easier if we had a reasonable carbon price per ton on things, because then the decisions become a lot clearer. And in fact, like ADB has a shadow carbon price now assigned to project evaluations, which is around, I think currently around $40 a ton, based on its IPCC level, and it's been indexed. That would really change your calculus. But I'm not cold and callous here. I understand that you're a coal-producing country in Indonesia. You have a huge ecosystem economy around that and a lot of people involved. But I do think you have an opportunity to transition. There is all these elements are there. If you take away sort of the financial status of PLN, you actually have a lot of opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Grant. I think your last point is very important in terms of carbon pricing, and that's actually Indonesia is initiating on that path with the recent regulation just this past month on carbon market regulations. Okay, the time shows 11:40, and since this conference is held every 2 years, this This is a very rare opportunities, and as I promised to you, I will open for 2 more questions, and I hope you can hold, for 20 minutes before we break for lunch. So I think the gentleman with the red batik, and then I think I will allow, my senior colleague from the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources to ask the last questions. Thank you. Please keep your question short, under 1 minute or 2 minutes.
Selamat siang. Terima kasih Pak Inka dan teman-teman hadirin yang saya hormati. Nama saya Edi Tampi, praktisi hulu migas, exploration, production, sudah dari tahun 71. Pertanyaan saya pertama, is it possible I have a job project, I need 200 million US dollar. I have 100 million US in my hand. I need 100 million US dollar again. I need for 10 years without interest. Is it possible? Is it possible? Because my business in exploration oil and gas, the interest cannot cost recovery by the Minister of Finance. Is it possible? The second question, I will inform to Mr. Slamet. I think everybody 100% love Indonesia, cinta Indonesia, sangat. Karena dengan statement pada bulan Juli tahun 2003, Bapak Menteri ESDM menyatakan Indonesia menjerit karena harus beli migas sangat-sangat besar, kurang lebih 1 bulan 2 miliaran US dollar. Because of what? Karena produksi nasional hancur. Investor asing maupun nasional selama 13 tahun ini banyak back off dari Indonesia. Mengakibatkan negara harus beli 1 juta barrel setiap hari, minimum. Pada bulan Juli, beliau bilang cost 1 barrel itu $80 harga internasional. Real. Kalau produksi dalam negeri, mau tahu berapa? $15 saja Pak. Bedanya berapa? Sekarang harga internasional udah 90. Kalau $15 produksi dalam negeri, jadi kelebihan, overpaid, karena harus beli, karena sangat dibutuhkan. Kalau tidak ada minyak, rakyat akan jalan kaki. $15 per barrel, cost per barrel, kalau produksi dalam negeri, semua orang menikmati keuntungan dari situ, tercipta lapangan kerja, dan negara dapat PPh 21 dan PPh 23 dari perusahaan yang dapat proyek dari PSC. Nah, selanjutnya, dalam 13 tahun ini, negara sudah habiskan 240 miliar US dollar. Itu disebabkan apa? Karena PP 79 tahun 2010 dan PMK yang aneh dari Kementerian Keuangan. Salah satu itu adalah bunga bank tidak bisa cost recovery. Maka itu saya tanya Mr. David, is it possible I borrow the money from your bank without interest for 10 years?
Oke.
Nah, masih ada Pak. Karena kenapa saya sendiri yang berteriak? Karena PSC asing maupun nasional itu kebanyakan TBK, 99%. Kalau saya pakai uang saya sendiri. Tapi demi Republik Indonesia, saya harus informkan kepada pemerintah, keadaan kita gawat, Pak, gawat. Karena TBK itu banyak ribut, nanti tidak ada sahamnya, tidak laku. Bagaimana kelangsungan hidup mereka? Maka itu perusahaan asing banyak lari ke Afrika. Ternyata dalam 15 tahun ini, 10 tahun ini, banyak negara Afrika jadi kaya raya dapat migas. Maka banyak pengalihan pemerintah sipil oleh militer. Selanjutnya, karena selanjut 10 tahun ke depan, sudah ketelanjur PSC pada kabur, mendapatkan migas itu minimum 10 tahun. Jadi terpaksa negara harus mengeluarkan uang selama 10 tahun 5.000 T. Kalau dari pinjaman 7.000 T. Mengerikan nggak, Pak? Untuk presiden yang akan datang. Harus menyediakan 5.000 T, kalau pinjam 5.000 T.
Okay, can you cut to the second question, please?
Already this is information for Minister of Finance.
Okay.
Very important for our country because permasalahannya adalah bunga bank tidak bisa cost recovery, lalu PPN selisih kurs, investor ikut tanggung jawab. Contohnya 10 tahun, 1 US adalah 9.000. Kami sudah bayar PPN yang lalu 9.000. Sekarang mau dikembalin 9.000 setelah 10 tahun. Belum apa-apa sudah rugi 6.000. Bukan 3.000, 6.000, Pak. Sekarang 15.350. Kenapa $1 jadi 15.000? Karena beli migas. Problemnya itu.
Okay, I think we should finish this question.
A little bit, please.
Okay, 1 more minute, okay? And I will have to stop because of the time constraint.
Okay, thank you.
But I think the major question, let's keep it with the theme of this session is financing.
Okay.
And I think the relevant question is that if you have 100 million, you need 100 million without interest, can you get it? I think that's the big question, right?
For
For
10
10 years. So I think maybe David and Pak Slamet maybe can try to answer that if you have some ideas on that. Thank you.
Sama satu lagi, because problem the investor back off every year, tiap tahun, ITB, Gajah Mada, Trisakti, UPN, lulus 1.500 mahasiswa perminyakan. Tidak ada lowongan kerja. Sedih tidak kalau adik ibu atau anak ibu setelah sekolah 4 tahun, apalagi cum laude tidak dapat job. Sangat sedih. Kalau 10 tahun, berarti 15.000 tidak dapat job. Saya kira ini very important.
Okay, thank you. I think that last question is probably cannot be answered in just a minute or two because that's deals with the macroeconomics fundamental as well. Yeah. Okay, Pak Maizar, I think your last questions. Please keep it short. 1 minute.
Okay, thank you, Pak Inka. My name is Maizar Ahmad. Yeah. We know that the PLN told us that there are 5,000 locations, remote location, isolated location. So they have a power plant diesel, and it runs only 4 or 6 hours a day. So the location cannot develop themselves, but they have potential, fish and many other things. So the power plant size only 500 kilowatt to 5 or 10 megawatt. Yeah. So how government can support the investment of that for the investor, that they can build the biomass or solar that can run 24 hours and can develop the islands of the isolated area. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Maizar. I think maybe each one of you can help to answer that, and along with maybe your closing statements as well, how to finance this renewable energy in Indonesia as well as in emerging countries. So let me start with David. Maybe you can try to answer the first question.
Sure, thank you. You know, I think Grant showed a good figure earlier about the different forms of capital. Is $100 million available, whether it's in grant or interest-free for 10 years? Yes, it's available, but you have to compete. You must compete with what your country wants. You must compete with other developers. You must compete with other technologies. So yes, there is out there. There's not enough. That is the reality. So that's where we need creative solutions. We need good structures to make these investments so that we can make that concessional capital leverage as much market capital as possible. So it is not easy. It is political, it is technical, it is financial, and it is social. You know, and that goes to the last question as well. You know, remote electrification is really, really difficult. You have small systems, you have small economies, you have, when you provide electricity for 4 or 5 hours a day, people want it for 6, 7 hours a day, then they want it for 8, as they should, absolutely, but the economies of scale for large systems are easier to manage than for small systems. And so, you know, the de-dieselization program that's being put forward by PLN right now, I think they've made some good improvements in it compared to the previous system. They've lowered their ownership of the plants. They have tried to aggregate the sets of systems so you can get some economies of scale for this. These are, I think, a good improvement. Let's see how the bids go. You know, I think the previous bid was not, or the previous bids were not successful, unfortunately. Hopefully, this recent round will improve that much more. It's important. It's needed for all these communities and to get to that 100% of high quality and sufficient electrification. But I know I'm not going to say the answer is X or the answer is Y, because I know it is challenging.
Pak Slamet, can you entertain us on the regulatory framework?
Yeah, thank you, Pak. Maybe I will answer the question from Pak Maisa first, Pak. Yes, the challenge, as already mentioned by Pak David, is very, very great. The remote area, 1,000 kilometers from Jakarta, you know. And I also have been in some small district in Kalimantan when I was have occasion a few years ago. Yes, there are some diesel power plant here, 7 to 5 only in the morning and afternoon. I'm sorry, only in the night, 5 to 7, only in the night. So maybe one thing that can be considered in terms of my personal experience is that when we're talking about a small project, we need to make it in a bundling scheme. You know, maybe let's say one project here, one project here, one project here. We can bundling together as one project, and then we can tender it as one project. Let's say 10 projects, small 10 project, we can tender it as a PPP, as a one project. So in terms of economy of scale, I think it's going to make sense for the private sector point of view. And also, I need to emphasize that it will cost much higher than the diesel itself maybe. So again, there should be political will from the government, from every part of the government. I think that's my answer for Pak Maisa. And for the question from Pak Edi, I think please allow me to speak in Bahasa to avoid my understanding. Pak Edi, Terima kasih Pak informasinya. Saya juga lumayan kaget Pak tadi ketika Bapak menyampaikan ada sumber minyak $15 ya Pak ya di nasional, jaraknya tidak jauh gitu ya Pak ya dari Jakarta let's say. Sedangkan pemerintah membeli di luar seharga $90 gitu ya Pak ya. Nah ini tentunya mungkin secara personal saya tidak dalam kapasitas untuk menjawab mengapa itu terjadi Pak ya. Pasti banyak sekali hal-hal di belakangnya. Apakah pemerintah mungkin sudah punya kontrak atau sudah ada hal-hal tertentu yang memang selama ini sedang berjalan dan tidak bisa dihentikan dan segala macam. Nah kalau dari personal opinion saya Pak ya, kalau ada seperti itu pastinya seharusnya pemerintah senang dengan itu ya Pak ya. Mungkin yang perlu dilakukan adalah bagaimana itu bisa terinformasi kepada seluruh stakeholder pemerintah khususnya Pak ya. Karena ini mungkin lebih terkait kepada nanti mungkin di sisi Kementerian ESDM dan Pertamina gitu ya Pak ya. Seperti apa? Kalau Bapak tadi cerita tentang peraturan-peraturan perpajakan, PLN dan lain-lain Pak, rasa-rasanya perlu conference yang berbeda Pak, yang lebih fokus gitu ya Pak ya. Karena memang itu isunya kalau di Kementerian Keuangan Pak, itu lintas eselon 1 bahkan Pak. Ya kalau tadi Bapak bilang soal PPN itu ada 2 unit yang menangani itu Pak. Dari sisi kebijakan itu di Badan Kebijakan Fiskal, dari sisi implementasinya itu di Direktorat Jenderal Pajak Pak. Artinya harus duduk bareng gitu. Harus ketemu, harus berdiskusi bareng permasalahannya seperti apa dan segala macam gitu Pak. Kalau dari sisi kantor saya Pak yang DJPPR yang tadi saya sebutkan memang mandatnya tusinya fokus kepada pengembangan infrastruktur Pak. Jadi nanti setelah ini ada sesi untuk makan siang berdiskusi Pak dengan senang hati kita akan berdiskusi hal-hal lebih lanjut Pak. Terima kasih Pak.
Okay. Thank you Pak Slamet. Yeah, I think that is cross sectoral and it's more on the oil and gas side, particularly on the long debate on cost recovery ya Pak Edi ya. Definitely that will require another conference on that issue. Let me ask Pak Pradana for 2 minutes if you have any response, and then last, I think Grant, if you don't mind, can you respond also to the questions, particularly the last questions on electricity?
Yeah, at the moment, SMI scope of work is limited to a few eligible sectors, which is in infrastructure. And unfortunately, oil and gas production is not one of them. If the question is whether SMI can do something about what is the involvement of SMI beyond the eligible sectors, yes, we can still go beyond our eligible sectors as long as there's government assignment. So that's the response. In terms of 0% loan, we have done state budget channeling for 0% loan, which happened very incidental and it's case by case basis, which is recently in 2020 to 2022, the economic recovery program because of COVID. So the government through the law already provided economic recovery program, and SMI was tasked to channel 0% loan to local governments. So again, it depends on government policy to actually provide affirmative pricing to beneficiaries. And then just to recap what my understanding coming out of this forum is that these forums produce perfectly the Indonesia energy trilemma between sustainability, energy security, and affordability. Sums up perfectly. There's people championing renewable energy, people championing clean coal, people championing oil and gas. Yeah. So there's a lot of multi-interests in this, and if I'm government, my hair will be fully grayed right now. So basically, it's very difficult subject to tackle. But I also want to reflect on the fact of the matter is globally, the advanced economy, with all due respect to David and Grant, the advanced economy are much bigger polluter than Indonesia. Yeah. And getting lesson learned from like US and China, even they take steps, yeah, not going that aggressive, if I may say so, yeah, in terms of energy transition. Even like what Grant said, yeah, even in the advanced economy, it's difficult to actually balance the differing interests for energy. So again, Indonesia is being pushed from all angles to more aggressive in energy transition. It will cost more for government, and we will definitely be interested in finding out what is going to be issued by MEMR on the energy transition roadmap as well as PLN revised RUPTL. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Pradana. Grant, you have the last response. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one quick thing, if you want a long-term loan with no interest, I would go for a Murabaha loan, a Murabaha investment. And I'm not only partially joking on that because it gets back to what David was saying. That Islamic finance actually is ideally suited for infrastructure assets and energy sector assets because of the benefits it derives at the end of the term of that agreement. And I think you should be using that more throughout the world, that kind of instrument. On the remote energy, actually, a case study we can look at is Maldives. Maldives is a member of the Scaling Up Renewable Energy Program, and that's went on for years, but I think they finally started cracking the code on this because it takes so much effort, energy inputs, and energy costs to get a barrel of diesel to an island or a remote location. That cost is, the real cost of that barrel getting there is very high. And as we were hearing, sometimes you have only 2 hours of running the generator in the morning or at night. What was interesting with adding the solar in a bundled fashion, as Arslama was recommending, is that suddenly people had access to power throughout the day. It transformed the way they used energy. And ultimately, the cost over that period was well worth it for the utility value of having access to energy. So I think there is a formula there. We can't think of it in terms of grid-provided energy with a bill. There's a different value and cost-benefit analysis for that, which I think works out and pays for itself in the end. But I would love to see that program go forward. They didn't get rid of all diesel, but they minimized its use, optimized its use. So that's something worth doing. In parallel with all these other things we were talking about today. And I would agree, we are, all of us in Indonesia, in the United States, fighting these battles and moving forward incrementally, but I do think we are moving forward. And we have to keep that energy with us. So that's what I'll close with.
All right, thank you very much. So let's end the session, and please give a big round of applause to all of our 4 speakers. Because of the time, I'm not gonna conclude the sessions. I think we will definitely formulate a policy brief that I think will be available to everyone soon. But simply what our speakers have said in their presentations, also in the Q&A, is that they gave valuable recommendations, emphasizing the need for much stronger collaborations between the private sector and the public sector, and also collaborations with multilateral development banks, the establishment of national green development banks, aligning climate and economic activities and strategies, and also maintaining transparency and pragmatic approach to the energy transition mechanism as well as PPP mechanism. So just a quick note to all the participants here: in order to receive the e-certificate, don't forget to complete the feedback form by scanning the barcode that will be shared on the screen. As you can see on the screen, we have also prepared lunch at the foyer, and after lunch we will have a closing ceremony alongside with the announcement of our competition winners. So stay tuned, and thank you all for your participation. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om. Namo Buddhaya. Salam sejahtera, salam sehat semua. Thank you. I will give back to the MC. Sorry.
Okay, thank you Bapak Inka for moderating today's discussion. And I would like to thank all the distinguished speakers and for such a lovely discussion. We finally come to the end of this parallel session. I would like to invite Bapak Inka to deliver the token of appreciation for all the speakers. So, sorry for the participation. Can you stand up? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we also like to invite you to have lunch and coffee break at the ballroom on the first floor. There will be an announcement of all the winners competition and also a super exciting door prize from the committee at the closing ceremony. Don't forget to fill out our feedback form by scanning the barcode on the screen. We will send you the participation certificate if you have done doing so. Thank you very much for your participation and wish you have a valuable time at our conference. Good day and enjoy the rest of your time at the conference. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi 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 Om. Namo Buddhaya.